It's time for our weekly best decks roundup for Marvel Snaps, from my own personal pocket picks that I've been enjoying to the best performing decks on Untapped after our recent Arishem nerfing OTA. Let's go ahead and dive on into the details, shall we? My first Jeff's pick this week is a Wiccan Collector deck. I think this build of Wiccan has a few things going for it. The first is that our hyper low curve means that we're able to activate Wiccan consistently without having to play any mediocre cards like Quicksilver or Domino. The second is that because we're playing pretty high average card quality that have lower costs, our deck is also pretty functional even when Wiccan doesn't show up. And then when he does show up, we're able to fully play out all of these cards that we're generating instead of just the best ones. Penny Parker feels pretty reasonable in this shell, not only filling curve for Wiccan, but also giving us a little bit of energy acceleration in the games where he doesn't show up. Pretty ideal curve with Penny is you'll Penny on 2, attach Spider to her on 3, and then you can Galacta plus a 1 energy card on turn 4 to start triggering her right away. The last thing that I love about this shell is that we get to play both Snow Guard as well as Legion to give us a fantastic amount of control over the locations in the game, which makes the deck extra consistent because we're essentially never losing to the random variance of bad locations flipping up, since we can almost always interface with them profitably. If you want to see this deck in action, be sure to check the link in the video description down below to my daily deck highlights channel where it was featured this week. My second just pick this week is a Moon Girl Thor's deck. That's my favorite way to play the recently buffed Beta Ray Bill. Moon Girl in tandem with King Atiri can let us double up our hammers, which is phenomenal considering the Stormbreaker now has 3 points of power. We can have these doubled up hammers also work phenomenally with Hitmonkey to give us an additional flourish at the end of the game. And then because we're a Moon Girl deck, in the games where our Hitmonkey or our Thor game plans don't come together, we have She-Hulk as an individually powerful card that loves to be copied when we pass with a bunch of unused energy on 5 to slam 2 Hulks on that 6th and final turn of the game. As far as higher series cards go, I would say Nico Minaru and Hydra Bob are the ones that are pretty replaceable in this deck list, with Titania or Blade or Iceman, other 1 energy cards that you can play out reasonably. We kick off our high potential category with a Thor's Lockjaw variation. For people who aren't familiar with my deck roundups here, these high potential deck lists have really impressive and promising stats on the Untapped tracker, but it's worth noting that they're newer decks that have smaller sample sizes so far. They could easily be the next breakout thing, but their metrics could also reasonably level out to something a little bit less impressive as the sample size grows. This take on Lockjaw has a couple of interesting inclusions, most notably of which is Kate Bishop Hawkeye, utilizing her 2 cheap arrows as things you can play into Lockjaw later in the game to get multiple flips. Seems like a really interesting use of this card. One notable interaction with Kate Bishop is that even if you play an acid arrow into the Lockjaw path and jumps over to your opponent's side of the board, when Lockjaw flips that back into your deck, the card that you're getting out is going to land on your side. This deck list is leveraging Gore as its absolutely massive stat stick of choice, but it's notable that that card can easily be substituted out for something like Magneto or Red Hulk as another 6-drop bomb that just puts numbers into play. Other substitutable cards in this deck are definitely Spider-Ham, who could be another generically good disruptive 1-drop like Korg or Iceman, while the non-replaceables in this deck are definitely King Eitri as well as Beta Ray Bill that are unique effects that aren't really replaceable. Our next high potential deck list is a Penny Parker Good Stuff deck featuring Galacta and Gwenpool at the top end of its curve to help power out more stats on the board. If you're looking to knock out your weekend missions and you're not a fan of playing Wiccan or he's missing in your collection, this is definitely the best statted deck to be doing with based on untapped metrics. This deck list also gets a lot of equity on the last turn of the game from playing various powerful tech cards such as Shang-Chi, Red Guardian, and of course Juggernaut, who can push around your opponent's plays on the most key turn of the game. For the sake of my sanity, I almost want to keep this next high potential deck list a secret, but I'd be remiss if I didn't share with you that there is this hella deck that has promising stats on Untapped so far. A couple of noteworthy pieces of technology in this build are Legion as an additional 5 energy strong play alongside Blink. His ability to control locations can win a lot of games on the spot, especially for a deck like Hela that's capable of cheating power into locations like Death's Domain or Altar. Odin is also a really interesting piece of technology here. It works quite stellar with things like Gambit, Corvus, and Jubilee, and can even make up for the fact that Hela can come into play early off of Jubilee, and then Odin can re-trigger her on turn 6 once you get a chance to discard some more things. Gore is a noteworthy inclusion here as well as a more recent card, but he's also not a make or break card in this shell by any means, so if he's missing in your collection, you can substitute a different 6 energy bomb of your choosing. Our last high potential deck list is a War Machine Black Swan variation that I played on my deck highlights channel recently that I was really impressed with. This is usually the most powerful Black Swan deck I've played that wasn't being utilized in a Hit Monkey or Bounce Shell. The basic idea is relatively straightforward. War Machine lets us play out Ebony Maw on that last turn of the game, so we can use Black Swan to make Ebony Maw, Hydra Bob, and Hood's Demon completely free and deploy them alongside either Alioth or Infinaut on that final turn of the game. In the games where we don't get Black Swan or War Machine together, we can also accelerate with Electro, who we either clear with Blink or trigger again with Misery to then pass on turn 5 so we can play Infinaut and 1 energy cards out on that 6th turn in a way that's very unpredictable and difficult for your opponent to keep up with. I will say that this deck list is not particularly budget friendly, with Hydra Bob being the only card that you can reasonably replace, subbing it out for something else like Rocket Raccoon or Titania that powers out stats through Black Swan on the last turn of the game. Moving into our top performing decks, we have overlap with the most popular being Wiccan variations. This particular deck list that I have up on your screen is one of the best performing on Untapped. That's also my preferred variation of this archetype, but it's worth noting that no particular 12 cards stand out as being more popular or more powerful right now. There's a lot of variation in what people are doing. Penny Parker is a card that feels very powerful and adds an element of consistency to this core, but I also don't think she's make or break here, so unless you absolutely love Wiccan, I think you could easily substitute her out for a different good 2 energy card and still play this archetype to great effect. Similarly, Gore at the top end, reasonable, solid inclusion, but can also be subbed out for something else like Magneto. I think he's a lot less important than Alioth, who gives you counterplay into other things. Other cards in this deck list that you may or may not be missing, such as Speed and Copycat, are easily substitutable for other 3 energy cards that you can play out proactively, such as a Mobius, a Luke Cage, a Gladiator, or even Polaris or Spider-Man. Our next top performer this week is Bounce Move, an archetype that's been putting up numbers pretty consistently since Anya and Madam Web were added to the game. Frigga got a 1-point boost in this week's OTA, making her slightly better in this deck, which was already her best one. Well, this particular sample deck list that I have on your screen is not playing it. It is noteworthy that there are people testing out Penny Parker in this deck in the Falcon slot, but in my own experience, she felt pretty clunky and awkward in order to consistently attach Spider to any of our move payoffs, so I'm choosing to showcase this build without her because I would wager it's probably the better list. Our third top performer this week is Silver Surfer Variations, which, similar to the Wiccan deck, have a lot of variety in the details in which are being played. I will note that a lot of the better performing lists that we have on Untapped so far have adopted this Zabu innovation alongside Absorbing Man, Galacta, and Gwenpool, though choosing to eschew the bigger energy reduction in Sarah and instead trying to make these cards cheaper by drawing them later after you play the cat out. The 3 energy cards have a ton of variation, and you can customize this core depending on what decks you want to tech against, with Brood, Sebastian Shaw, and Silver Surfer obviously being the most important ones to make sure that you have. Finally, after Wiccan, the second most popular deck per metrics on Untapped post Infinite is still Arishem, even after its pretty heavy nerf. There's a lot of people experimenting with different things, both variations of Thanos Wiccan, this more stock list like I have on your screen, and even folks trying cute things like Quicksilver and Domino to play Wiccan inside of this core to really ramp up your energy acceleration. None of them have particularly standout stats. They are not any best performing decks this week by the metrics that we currently have, but it's also noteworthy that they don't really have terrible metrics by and large, with them being fairly middle of the road, meaning I think news of this archetype's death was greatly exaggerated and appears early on at least to still be competitive if it's an archetype that you truly enjoy playing. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. As always, I would love to hear about the decks that you're having fun playing and finding success with in the comments down below. And remember, if you want to see me playing a ton of these decks and other fantastically fun and interesting Marvel Snap decks, be sure to check out my daily deck highlights channel where I upload things 7 days a week. If you're new to this channel and you want to get best decks roundups like this every single week, other Marvel Snap game news updates, make sure you're subscribed here at Hoaglandia Snap as well.